As our friend in the City of Five Nations, Ben Williams, says, I am looking forward to today, as we have today a special guest from Washington, our representation actually in Washington. And I want to welcome in Senator James Lankford. James, thank you very much for being with us today.
Absolutely glad to be able to be with you. And thankfully, this time not from Washington, from lovely Oklahoma. We're at a chance to be able to visit with you from here, but get a chance to obviously go back and forth to the office in D.C. regularly.
Well, I know that it's important for you to come back and forth because you really try to keep your feet on the ground. Whenever I'm at some sort of convention or rally or something like that, I see you quite often, and you're sporting a jacket, a local jacket from one of our universities.
Yeah, it's nice. Actually, this is one of my favorite jackets to wear. I'm not just wearing it just to be on the broadcast. I've actually got it on all day because today it's about 55 degrees and it's perfect weight, and I love getting a chance to be able to sport OBU stuff.
Well, I appreciate that. I know a little bit about your background, but I would like for you just to take the opportunity to be able to speak a little bit about James Lankford, the human being. Who is James Lankford, really?
Well, hopefully, if people were to look at me and to be able to talk and be able to set aside who I am, I'm unashamedly a Christian. Jesus changed my life radically when I was a child, and I've continued to enjoy that transformation now. I'm a husband. My wife, Cindy, and I have been married 28 years. We have 2 daughters, so I enjoy being a dad of daughters. My girls are 23 and 20 years old, and they are remarkable ladies, to be able to say the least. And so if you strip away all those things on it for who I am on the essence, it's not senator as title on that. That's my job that I'm doing right now. I'm going to try to be a person that's a consistent Christian, and I try to be a person that's a husband and a dad, and then also to be a good representation for who we are as a state.
James, with that being said, and I being a man of faith as well, and to you, tell me, who is God? What is God to James Lankford?
So if I take back just the Easter time that just finished up, I look at 2 Corinthians chapter 5. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, it talks about the significance of what it is for the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. If I look at who is God at that point, I understand he is a creator. He's the designer of who we are and how this world functions. But he's also the one who distinctly loves people because he loves to love people. He doesn't need us. We need him in that design, but we also are separated from him based on the dumb things we do. It's not often that you run into someone that says they're perfect. Occasionally you'll run into the quarterback of the high school team who will tell you he's perfect, but everyone kind of knows he's not. But for most people understand, hey, I do things wrong. I need to be forgiven by other people, and ultimately I need to be forgiven by God. When I look at who God is in his essence, he came to us to be able to say, hey, I love you, coming to earth to be able to die for your sin, to be able to make sure you're not separated from God, and so you can be connected to him. Now, I know that's a distinctly faith story, but I really do believe that the God of the universe does care about our daily lives, that he didn't create us, wind up the world, and walk away, that he is the creator, designer, but he also understands how we've damaged this creation and how we've damaged the relationship with each other and with him, and he came and brought us a way to be able to repair that.
Well, I love that. I believe God is love. I believe that that defines, he's so magnanimous in everything that we see around us. And I'm wondering, as you've progressed through life, and I know that you've held many different positions, when was it that you determined, hey, I need to run for political office? And how did that come about?
So I'm kind of an odd duck in the sense that I'm a youth pastor that's now serving in the Senate. I don't know of anyone that says, if you really want to be a U.S. Senator one day, be a youth pastor first, because that's clearly the route to the U.S. Senate. This was not on our life radar. I served with students for 22 years, loved working with students. I was the director of the Falls Creek Youth Camp, loved doing that. That's a remarkable place if you're going to work with students. To be able to work at the Falls Creek camp gives you the opportunity to be able to work with 5,000 students a week, every week, at pivotal moments in their life when they're getting a chance to be able to get away and kind of process what they're doing in life, what direction they're going, how they do in their life with their parents and everything else. So I love getting a chance to be able to work with students and to be able to invest in future generations. But in 2008 and 2009, my wife says it best. She calls it life's greatest interruption. We really sensed God calling us to do this. And that wasn't an audible voice. There wasn't a lightning bolt. There wasn't a script in the clouds. No angel showed up to us. It was just this overwhelming sense that when we sat down to pray, we really felt a calling to do this. And we struggled with that for a long time and thought, this is crazy. I had no political background. No one in my family's in politics or in law. So this really was a real sense of, I don't get this. I don't understand what direction you're going. But after 7 months of struggling with this, I said to Cindy at some point, I'm going to be an old man one day telling my grandchildren about the time I didn't follow what I felt like God was calling me to do. And so we literally sacrificed it all. That September of 2009, I resigned my position at Falls Creek. We spent the next year running for Congress, living off our life savings, which as a youth pastor, you can imagine is significant as a life savings. We lived off our life savings and then ran for Congress, won, and have been serving since that time period, since 2011. So it's been our joy to do it, but we feel like we're basically still doing ministry, just in a different place. We're still doing what we can to be able to serve families, still trying to be faithful to the task. But we get a chance to work with a lot more families now.
We are talking with Senator James Lankford, and you are watching We Are City of Five Nations podcast in our series, 30 Days of Community Building. And Senator, now let's transfer into the idea of Senator James Lankford and talk about your office. What's the mission statement within your office that you talk to the team about on a regular basis? And how do you set about your day to perform your duties as senator?
So all of my staff would know the comment, right thing, right way. We really believe there's a right thing to do. There's a right way to do it. Oftentimes in politics, people try to do the right thing the wrong way, or they'll actually do the wrong thing the wrong way. We're focused on doing the right thing the right way. That involves first serving people. If we're going to do public service, that means we got to get involved. We've got to be engaged with people. We've got to hear what the issues are and then try to be able to solve those problems. Sometimes those are short-term and issues that are dealing with a federal entity. Sometimes those are long-term issues that are going to need to be resolved over the next several years. We're always working on both. What are we called to be able to do ultimately is the task here. We're called to be able to serve people. So how are we going to do that from day to day becomes the next big challenge. We work on education, we work on agriculture, we work on business, we work on employment issues, we work on basic operations of government to be able to make sure we're more efficient, which we desperately need help with as a federal government just based on the size of us. Work on transportation issues, economic development, trade issues. So on any given day, whether it's military service or whether it's elementary education, there's a lot that's going on our plate that we're trying to be able to work through the issues and be able to help resolve that. So when I say what a typical day is 10 topics or 15 topics of different things that we're trying to be able to work through. So we got a lot of balls that we're juggling at that point to resolve. Right now, around COVID-19, we have one giant beach ball in the middle of all that really consumes a lot of the day. But even with that, I spent last weekend 2 hours on the phone with the energy minister from Saudi Arabia, talking about oil issues between Saudi Arabia and the United States as we're trying to be able to navigate back and forth with a small group of 10 of us dealing with energy issues. So even though we're dealing with COVID-19, I got to deal with energy issues. I spent 30 minutes on the phone this morning talking about cattle prices and where we are and packers and producers and trying to deal with ag issues because that's important to us. We deal a lot with the economic security of where we are for unemployment. So spent a lot of time with Robin Robertson on unemployment issues and how we're getting those issues resolved for people that are most vulnerable. So again, lots of issues come up. We attack those day by day. We've got to be able to plan out what are the key things we've got to be able to work on with an early morning, quick stand-up meeting with our staff, and then get after it.
So in everyday life, I kind of call those, it's a term I became familiar with, tyranny of the moment, and those things that are all happening around us right now that we've got to take care of. As far as a senator in your heart, what is the biggest obstacle that you see that we as a people have to overcome, say in the next 2 or 5 years, that is crucial for us here in America?
We have got to get over us and them. We have become an us and them culture, not just politically Republicans, Democrats. It's I think like this, you think like that. You are those people. I am us, and we don't think alike, and I don't associate with you. We see it online. If I disagree with you on one or two issues, I'll shame you publicly. I'll try to attack you. I'll try to spread you out, and then eventually push you aside and to say nothing you bring up is going to be relevant to me because you're one of them, whoever the them is. We've got to be able to attack that. We have spent a lot of time as a culture attacking the issue of race relations, saying, why do we divide based on race? And for decades, we've been making advancements on race. And now we're suddenly trying to find ways to be able to divide each other in every which way. Race, political perspective, gay, straight, religious preferences, economic issues. It seems like every north-south, we seem to be dividing ourselves in every way we possibly can into smaller and smaller groups and becoming louder and louder. You're an okay boomer, you're a millennial, you're a Gen Xer, whatever it may be. Into this constant separation, we've got to be able to figure out how to be able to look at other people with respect, to say we disagree on some issues, but we probably agree on some issues. Let's find the areas we agree on and the areas we disagree on. Let's have respectful dialogue to be able to talk about those things, to be able to work it out. We're not going to agree on everything. We're just not. A family can't agree with what they want to all have for dinner in a night, and they all love each other and know each other best. So we're going to have disagreements on issues, especially big, hard, complicated issues. But it doesn't have to start with you're those people and I'm not. It should start with, hey, we disagree on some things. Let's sit down on the things we agree on. Let's try to solve those. And it's really become toxic in DC with an us-them separation, where even some of the most basic things that we all agree on, people will say, yes, we all agree on that, but let's try to add something we disagree on to make you swallow something that I don't want you to do. And then that suddenly becomes this whole toxic issue of things not getting done because both sides are trying to hurt the other one rather than trying to accomplish things.
Well, and that's a basic fundamental in the art of war that people talk about all the time, that if you can separate people, they're much easier to divide and conquer and to lead into places perhaps they don't want to go. I'm so happy to hear you talk along those lines, James. Thank you for sharing that. That really hits some of my heartstrings. And now as we come back to COVID-19 and some of the ways in which it's affected all of us, one of the ways in which the Congress has acted and the federal government has acted is bringing in the different kind of loan programs. So I went through the process, and yesterday morning got word that the funds were exhausted and perhaps I wouldn't get funded, which honestly is okay. The only reason I went through the process was because I was going to meet with you, and I wanted to have gone through some things that many people have already experienced. Now, though, with that being the answer, I was wondering, what is the status of the loan program? Is there anything new that you have to share? And what do people have to look forward to?
So there were quite a few programs that were stood up during what's called the CARES Act. There was unanimous agreement in the Senate on this, overwhelming agreement on the House. They did what's called a voice vote in the House to be able to pass it. So there's a lot of unanimity on these issues. One of the programs there was called the Paycheck Protection Program. It's $350 billion that was allocated to the Paycheck Protection Program. It was designed to be able to help individuals that would end up on unemployment stay connected to their employer. Our system is not built to have millions and millions and millions of people go on unemployment. That's a narrow part of the funnel to be able to get through the unemployment agencies, as we've seen in Oklahoma. A typical week in Oklahoma, you had about 1,400 people would go into unemployment somewhere statewide. We've had 45,000 each week. We're not set up for that. As a nation, we will typically have a big month of unemployment. It will be about 2.5 million people nationwide go into unemployment. This past month, we've had 22 million people go into unemployment. That's a major issue. And the system's not built for that. So what we try to do is set up the Paycheck Protection Program so that people could stay connected to their business. It gives 8 weeks of pay for the payroll to a small business, and it has to be a small business or a not-for-profit. If it's a small business or not-for-profit, they can go in and get their payroll covered for 8 weeks because just about everybody is shut down across the country. And that allows them to be able to keep them connected to their business, keep their normal payroll going, keeps those individuals from having to file for unemployment, and to be able to manage it. The first assumption was $350 billion would be enough. Clearly, it is not. 2 weeks into it, about 1.6 million businesses and not-for-profits have received these funds, but there's overwhelming need for it still. So we've tried to add another $250 billion into it. We're not in DC right now. We're all working remotely. We can't vote on the floor, but we can have what we call pro forma sessions. And I'm going to take you down a rabbit hole real quick on Senate policy. Even when we're not meeting and in session, we'll have pro forma sessions. Those pro forma sessions are basically someone gavels in, you can do some quick business then, and you gavel out. But anything you move has to move unanimously during that time period because we're not all in the room. Everybody has to call in advance and say, yep, I'm not going to oppose this. If anyone says I oppose it, then it's not even brought up, or it's brought up and it fails because that person shows up and says no. We've had 3 pro forma sessions, 1 last week, 2 this week, to try to move anything we could unanimously. One of those was Paycheck Protection Program to say, let's advance the funding. We all agreed on this. So my Democratic colleagues said, okay, we'll agree to that, but you have to agree to a whole bunch of other things as well that we want to be able to add into it. And Republicans have said, whoa, let's do the thing that's run out of money. The other things have not run out of money. You may want to do some other things. The one thing that has run out of money is the small business portion of this. Let's just fund that, and then we'll argue about the rest of it when we get back into session the first week of May. So far, we've not been able to get agreement from 100 of us to all move this. So hopefully we'll be able to get that. We have another pro forma session coming up early next week, and we'll try to be able to move it again. And we'll keep moving through that until we get it solved. Excuse me for my quick little cough there. I don't have a fever and I don't have shortness of breath, just so you'll know.
Yes, sir. And with that being said, it is still advisable for all of us who have small businesses to go ahead and work through your financial institution. You can still put your applications in. They go into a list. They go into some sort of order dependent on the institution that you choose to work with. And then if there is more funding that is approved, then you get stepped right into line, and hopefully your business could get funding if you're eligible and if all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Would that be fair enough to say, James, to go ahead and continue on with that process?
That is very fair. Bank to bank, they're going to make a decision on that. Some banks, because the banks are kind of the gatekeepers on this, on managing the paperwork for it and getting it in. Some banks are going to say, hey, there's not any money in it right now. Come back because we don't know what's going to happen. Some banks are going to say, keep getting the applications in. We'll put them in the order we received them. And if they add more money to it, then we're going to launch them in the order that we received it. I would encourage you to be able to reach out to your bank and say, hey, I'd like to get in line that if this is out there again, my application is ready, it's complete. And then we can take off on it from there and they can launch. We're working with the Treasury actually today in our early morning call that I talked about earlier, where we try to connect each day to go through the issues of the day. One of the things in our early morning call this morning was lining up a time with Treasury to be able to talk today about what happens when this is refunded, because my hope is we will get it refunded, and so that people can continue to be able to get the help that they need. Because again, 1.6 million businesses is a lot of people that are having their paychecks that are protected on that. But there's still more to be able to go and want to be able to take care of that.
Well, the intent, James, of this week in our podcast has been to reach out to people that we would like to meet, because it's easy for us sometimes to go up and talk and build community with those that we already know. But reaching out, sometimes we're hesitant. We feel vulnerable. We don't know what other people are going to think when we approach them, and just saying hello and getting to know them. And you were one of those individuals that we've been fortunate enough to meet today. And I want to thank you for your time. I know that you're very busy, but your office was very accommodating as someone who's just called in to see what would happen. Thank you very much for spending some time, and I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Well, I appreciate that very much. I talk a lot to people about what I call Sunday solutions, and I talk a lot about this issue with race. I'm amazed at the number of Oklahomans that I talk to that they've never had a person of another race in their home for a meal. And so several years ago, I just started asking people, when's the last time, or have you ever had a person in your home for a meal of another race, to invite their family over, not for just some agenda, just invite somebody over to get to know them better. That has expanded out to all kinds of differences in the days ahead. And so I appreciate you bringing that up. We should be better as a nation and as a community. We're all Oklahomans. We don't all agree on issues, Well, we've got to get to know each other and to be able to stop pushing each other away and to say, yep, we're going to disagree on some things. We're probably going to agree on some things. Let's get to know each other and try to figure this out together. That's the fun of being a republic. We're not a communist nation with authority from on high delegating to everybody. We are us. And so we get a chance to be able to make a lot of decisions together. So appreciate that. Keep doing the good job of getting a chance to be able to introduce all kinds of different people to be able to engage and find ways we can serve and get to know each other.
Well, I have to hold you for a couple of minutes now longer because you brought something up. Are you going to ask me? You said you were going to, you play a game with the people that you meet. I love games.
Yeah. The simple question is then, have you ever had a person of another race in your home for dinner?
I love that, and I am glad you're doing it. And yes, in fact, the last person that I invited over to dinner was a dear, dear young man. He was convicted of a felony in early life, and he worked through the process. He's a family man. His number one heart was really to be a dad to his kids and a husband to his wife. And it was so hard. He went through our career tech system, which I am a firm believer in. And he was the last one in his class always to be offered that job. But he overcame, and after a 3-year process, he's now working locally in industry, providing, and just, I don't know anybody who is smiling brighter and that I like to be around more than Tyrone, and just a wonderful individual. And now I get to ask you, right? I get to come back and say, okay, Senator, have you ever had someone of a different race in your home to have dinner? And when was the last time?
Well, it's been a little while for us just because of COVID-19, and we're all kind of sequestered away from each other now. But yes, I absolutely have had multiple people of different races in my home for dinner. I'll give you a couple of examples of this. I have the Hernandez family who've become very dear friends to us. They've come over to the house. We like to be able to cook out and make pizza on our grill. And this is
yes.
I've come to think of it, this is a Shawnee issue as well. We love Shawnee Mills and their pizza dough. We can put it out, roll it all out of their pizza dough, and actually throw it on the grill outside, put everything else on it, and make grilled pizzas on it. And it's fantastic. And it's like a full contact meal. And so it's fun for us. We'll invite people over to be able to come. We can all stand around the grill. We can all get our hands dirty and everything else. We're putting everything on our pizzas and make it and be able to sit around and visit. It makes for just a really fun day. So there are lots of folks that have been in my home, all kinds of different races that have been here. We developed some real friendships and real engagement for people that are not there because they're a certain race. They're friends and they become just a part of our family.
We love that. Thank you very much, James, for your time. Thank you for spending time with us here on the City of Five Nations podcast. And I hope to talk with you again soon.
Sounds good.
Thank you for being with us today as we had Senator James Lankford on the podcast, and we look forward to tomorrow talking with another community member, David Whited. And on Sunday, we have the Reverend Ron Horton, who I hope that many of you already know from right here in the City of Five Nations on the We Are City of Five Nations podcast, 30 Days of Community Building. And remember, here in the City of Five Nations, together, we are building community one season at a time. See ya.